knowing when the right time to do something is, and then being patient enough to be aware of when those right times are and to wait for those right times. And if you kind of nail all those things, you end up having a lot more clarity about the situations you're in and the ability to kind of work less and achieve more.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Jim Vaselopulos to the show. Now, Jim has written a book called Clarity, Business Wisdom to Work Less and Achieve More. And we had a really fun conversation. So we dove into the topic of clarity pretty deeply. It's a big word, that gets thrown around a lot in the business world. And Jim does a really nice job of sort of breaking it down on what it means to him and, how things like distractions can play a really critical role in our ability to not have clarity. So a lot of good discussion there. We also had a pretty cool chat about the difference between business symptoms and business problems. So I know I enjoyed that because there's tons of parallels between that and what we're doing in continuous improvement. And finally, we did sort of talk about sort of parallels between what he was writing about in his book and just continuous improvement. For example, we talked about, like the Gemba walks and like how a Gemba walk, plays into some of the things that he was writing about. So he does have a background in manufacturing and things like that. So he's all about lean and whatnot as well. So I think you're going to really enjoy this show. I know it was a lot of fun to record. Show notes can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Just look for episode 516. Okay, enough from me. Let's get to the show. Jim, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. Things are going great today.
All right. Where are you calling in from?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, okay. Are you getting dumped on with snow?
No, a lot of rain.
Okay.
But I feel, we're supposed to get some snow, but I think I actually have to drive up to Chicago tonight. So I think I'm going to go through some pretty nasty stuff tonight.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with a guy in Wisconsin, and he's poor guys in Wisconsin. They get it. They get it hard. So I'm in Texas now, where I believe it or not, we're going to be down into like the 10 degrees next week. Like for us, that's like insanity, but yeah, that time of year. All right. Well, hey, Jim, I'm excited to have you on and we talk a little bit about your book and get into all kinds of interesting things. But right out of the gate, we like to have our guests open up with a quote. So do you have one?
Yeah, I do. Buddy of mine, Frank Reardon, years ago, gave me a little piece of advice, and I'm sure it wasn't his quote, but I'll give it to credit to Frank. He said, okay, "Only do that which only you can do." And it really was a big game changer for me because, I was one of these, capable guys that did a lot of stuff. But then as I elevated in, what I was doing within my companies and the role I was playing, it really changed the game for me because, it just got me to lean into delegating more and building stronger teams below me and really letting go. And I thought that was a pivotal point in my development as a leader.
Got it. Well, let's hear a little bit about your background, Jim, like how you got involved in this kind of work and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, I mean, right now I do, executive coaching and business advising and things like that. And I've been doing that for a number of years now. But, I started my career in manufacturing. I was one of those geeky kids that, wanted to know how everything was made and sat over the shoulder of any repairman that came to the house. I always wanted to know how things worked. And so I got an engineering degree and got a job up in cold Milwaukee, working for a company called Allen Bradley at the time. Yep. And, it was great, formative years for me, for my education, for my development. Really enjoyed being early on a designer of automation equipment, then got into manufacturing management and really kind of developed a career there. And, fortunately, through some random set of events, got involved in the internet because we were connecting up machines to the internet before it was cool. Started some tech companies after that. And that's where my tech journey took off and spent a lot of time in tech and then sold some of those and then started helping other people, run the playbook we ran. Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of my journey.
Okay. Well, and you're also an author, right? So you've written a book called Clarity, Business Wisdom to Work Less and Achieve More. So why do you decide to write a book? Just because everybody needs a book or what? Or
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, I always kind of thought I wanted to write a book someday. That was always in the back of my head. But in recent years, in doing the kind of work I do, and then also doing a lot of work on podcasts, I've got a leadership podcast. People were like, Jim, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I'm like, there are a lot of leadership books out there. There are a lot of things out there. And I wanted to kind of find something that was unique to me. And my clients were all saying, like, listen, you help us see the world clearly. And I thought, I should probably think very carefully about what I do and see if I can't capture some of that value in a book. There's no need for it to kind of rest with me. It's something that has been useful to me, useful to my clients, and let's make sure that it has a life of its own.
Yeah. And so throughout the book, you've used fictional stories. So what was the reasoning for that?
Well, stories are what we remember, right? I can't tell you the number of people, I've spoken with through the years, and you don't remember really like the acronyms they used or, the methodology that they put forth. It's always like, oh my God, that story about the Bacon Wars or that story about this or that, Yeah. You remember that stuff. And so I just wanted to make sure that as I was putting a book together, I didn't put together a textbook. Like, I've had enough textbooks. I don't know about you, but like the last thing I want to do is go read another scientific journal or textbook or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to put these lessons together in the form of stories. And when I was in business school, I thought case studies were fun, but they were always kind of really focused on like one thing. It was really obvious. It's like, oh, we're dealing with, scaling issues, or we're dealing with, growth issues, or we're dealing with, some other type of crisis. And I thought, I want to put together these rich stories of these fictional characters to really show people what really happens in business, like how it really works, and to make it a bit entertaining. And so, the early feedback from people who've read the book is they always come back and say, man, I love it when Diana did this, or when Sam said that to Simon. That was so cool. Yeah. I was like, that's how I know it worked. That's how I know it, the stories were the right way to communicate.
Yeah. Well, I still remember, have you read The Goal?
Oh yeah.
It's like Alex Rogo, man. This is burned to my brain, right? Old Alex. And so that's the OG, right, of the business novel.
Exactly. And so,
Well, I'm going to circle back though to clarity. I'm curious to get your perspective. Like, that's a big word, clarity, and it's thrown around a lot in the business world. Like, what's it mean to you? Clarity.
I think it dovetails a little bit with kind of that quote I started off with, which is, only do that which only you can do, is really only focus on that which matters most, And so with clarity, what you're trying to do is kind of strip away the things that distract us, that get in our way of seeing the world around us clearly. And, it's kind of like an onion. You're peeling away layers of the onion. And that's kind of the way the book is written. In the first section, we talk about symptoms that often distract us from real problems. The next section, we go a little deeper and talk about problems and what makes them unique and how we kind of need to look at them. And then we go a little deeper and talk about how our human frailties, our human proclivities get in the way of seeing the things around us clearly, and try and get into a lot of those things like our emotions, our imagination, the way we favor making assumptions and things like that. And so really talk about that. And then, there's another section that takes the layer of the onion a little deeper, that talks about how time is really one of these really important things. And time is, don't think about it in terms of time management. I like to think about it in terms of sequencing, timing, and patience. It's like doing things in the right order, knowing when the right time to do something is, and then being patient enough to be aware of when those right times are and to wait for those right times. And if you kind of nail all those things, you end up having a lot more clarity about the situations you're in and the ability to kind of work less and achieve more. And that's really, the secret sauce I figured out. And it's like, it seems unrealistic, but literally I was doing a 60-hour-a-week job for years on end, decades really. And once I really leaned into this, I got it down to where I was doing my job in 4 to 6 hours a week. And people were like, how are you doing that? And that afforded me all this extra time to kind of learn new things and, do all kinds of extra stuff I never imagined I could. But it's really only by being very intentional about what you pay attention to and trying to strip away the things that just distract us and tend to not really even matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do want to circle back to distractions in a little bit, but you mentioned in sort of your review there, the whole topic of symptoms, business symptoms and business problems. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what are the differences between business symptoms and business problems?
Yeah, it's a fair question because most of the time, the things that I would characterize as symptoms, people look at business problems, and I'd say, let's just take something that probably exists in every business. It's like there's a level of conflict. Conflict is, a symptom like a medical symptom. It's like, the pain in your left arm, okay, before a heart attack, like something bad's going to happen. You've got conflict, something's brewing, but it's not the pain in the left arm that's the problem. The conflict isn't the problem. There's a root cause that's, beneath that. And, what I find so interesting is that the manufacturing world is so good about driving down to root causes. Yet when it comes to like the business world, we're so poor at that. And so we don't even apply the same methodology and thinking to get down to the root cause. Conflict is a symptom, much like, alignment or accountability are symptoms of deeper problems. And what you need to do is drill down a little bit deeper and find out what's really going on. And the common theme between anything that would be characterized, the way I define it, as a symptom versus a true problem, is symptoms are outcomes. Okay. They're an outcome. Conflict is an outcome of other things. Being too busy is an outcome of other things. Culture is an outcome. If you have a poor culture or a weak culture, it's an outcome of decisions you're making on a daily basis. It's not necessarily the culture doesn't exist as a thing. And so I think the big difference when we're looking at symptoms versus problems is symptoms are outcomes. Problems actually are where you need to start digging a little deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, you're right. I mean, just human behavioral things like getting to root cause analysis on that is, it's not done very often. And well, humans are fickle, right? Since we're all involved in it. And that means that we may have to peel some of our own onion back on ourselves as well, and our own bias and whatnot. So, hey, I'm wondering if we could circle back. I'd be interested, we're recording here in early part of 2024 and, everybody's got New Year's resolutions and all this kind of stuff. And I want to circle back to distractions, because you mentioned that earlier. Like, most obvious distraction is like your smartphone for me or whatever, right? Like what kind of other what do you mean by business distractions? I mean, is it things like that, or there are more specific things that you're talking about?
Well, so, there's so many of these things, like the symptoms are distractions because they're really just, it's like treating a fever. Like, you can spend time treating a fever with aspirin and stuff like that, or acetaminophen. But the reality is the fever isn't the problem. There's an infection. There's a
fever's
bug or
helping
a virus.
you, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fever's just symptomatic of something deeper. And so that's the first layer. But I think most of the distractions that really jam us up are, kind of our head trash. And, some of those things that really kind of get in the way. We did a project years ago where we were doing a bunch of reporting for a client in one of my IT firms. And, this is a story that's bandied about, and people, urban legends say people have done this, but I've actually seen it done a number of times, where people are asking for more reports and more reports and more reports. And you can spend an endless amount of money on reports. And, the best way to find out what really is moving the needle within your organization is just to stop doing all the reports and seeing who complains. And you'll find out that like very few people complain. There's always like the one report that everyone looks at that's like, oh my God, you got to turn that thing back on. And so now if you think about it, you might have, let's say 40 reports at your disposal and you only really look at one. I'm not saying that's right, but the reality is it's kind of like that's the one that matters. Everything else might actually be a distraction. And it's kind of like if you're in college and you get into some semester and, you know, if you're a freshman and the professor puts out a syllabus and says, oh my God, you need to do all these things. And then, you know, you get into your second class on your first day of college and you're like, oh my God, I'll never have time in my life to do all this stuff. But, you know, the jaded senior who's in the back of the room or the experienced junior is just like, yeah, you don't need to buy that book. Don't worry about that. And as long as you ace the quizzes, you're probably going to get a decent grade. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you know, experience will tell you what matters and what doesn't. But we don't always see that. And we don't even take the time to really think about it. You know, there are all kinds of emotional things that we do, shortcuts we take. One of the biggest ones is, you know, we get distracted because we take assumptions as fact a lot of times. And so I had a position in probably at least 3 different companies where I was kind of the corporate fixer. And people would say like, hey, Jim, we got a problem client, or we got a problem with this, you know, part, you know, that we're manufacturing. Can you help sort this thing out? And I developed a reputation at 3 different companies of being really good at this. And I was like, why am I good at this? Because I had like imposter syndrome. I was like, I have no idea why I can go figure this stuff out pretty quickly and get people to be like, oh, okay, that's cool. And after a number of years, I figured out it was just because I was really good at spotting assumptions. And assumptions are, once you're aware of it, like this is one of the little tips and tricks out of the book, is they're really easy to spot. Anytime someone says something like, it must, usually, generally, in most cases, you know, most of the time, anytime someone says any phrase like that, it's a rock solid guarantee that anything that is said immediately after that is an assumption. And assumptions are where you need to dig, because assumptions are usually where we make the problems. You know, if I go back to my engineering education, it's like, you know, list out your assumptions. You know, we have these techniques to solve problems. We just don't apply them in the business world, you know, for human type problems. And so that's really, I think, where, you know, I've tried to help people see, hey, if you can strip away, you know, your problems and get to the things that matter, that's really going to help you get clarity on a situation and only worry about the things that matter. Because so much of what we are inundated with, whether it's through our smartphones, from our email, from, you know, all the way too many meetings that we have, most of it is just chatter that doesn't matter and it doesn't move the needle.
Man, you mentioned a smartphone. I've done this over the years, that I try to do it more often now. Turning my phone to grayscale, which makes it black and white basically. And, cause your brain doesn't light up, right? Cause these damn phones are designed to light your brain up every time you look at it. So yeah, I have a little shortcut. All I got to do is hit the side button 3 times and it goes gray. So like, that's one way, practical way that I use to try to like stay focused, right? And get off of my smartphone, because my gosh, for me, that's probably my Achilles heel. Even at home, you know, I should be playing with my kids or whatever. When I'm, you know, Dad, go play ball. Hold on. Yeah, when I'm scrolling on my stupid phone, you know, dad of the year, you know. So yeah, distractions are a killer, man. So hey, I want to dive back into your book a little bit. I know it's not like you're like a traditional like lean book or anything like that, but I see a lot of parallels between our 2 worlds. Something like a Gemba walk. Like where do you see like a Gemba walk and what you're writing about sort of playing well together?
You know, I think people buy into the idea of a Gemba walk. Let's walk around the plant. Let's talk to people. Let's, you know, figure things out. And I've seen them done well and I've seen them done poorly. You know, when you're just going through the motions, I mean, that's like whatever. I mean, it's not really having an effect. When you see a Gemba walk really having substance is when people are asking good questions. And I think one of the missing components of, you know, kind of what makes someone wise is not what they say, it's the questions they ask. And so a really functional Gemba walk is got very good questions embedded in it, instead of just like, hey, let's go out and do the report and go through the motions and say, here's where we were on safety, here's where we were on quality, blah, blah, blah. That's nothing good is happening there. At the same time, it's such a good concept that, people neglect it on the human side. Let's say in the office part of the business, it's like we used to have this term, and I think it was like back in the 80s or 90s, it was like management by walking around. That's essentially was, to some degree, a Gemba walk within the office. And people just don't do that anymore. They'll slack someone, it's like, get out of your freaking chair and talk to someone and see them face to face. Now it's harder today because we are working more remote. And so, we have to be more intentional, but that's where, when we are more intentional, that's where structure, something like a Gemba walk, where it's like, hey, I just want to kind of walk around the room, do a stand-up meeting at the beginning of a day with all the people in accounting or finance or manufacturing management. Just say, what's going on? Ask some good questions and make sure that we're very intentional about like polling people for what's going right, what's going wrong, where do you need help? And, these are such great concepts in manufacturing. They work really well. And we don't apply them to the other half of the business. It's like, why not? I mean, they're really good ideas.
Yeah. Hey, so I know you've got a tech background. So last week I had a gentleman on the show, and he was more in the software tech space as well. And we had a really interesting AI conversation, which, comes up in pretty much every tech conversation these days. And I've been really pondering it. So one of my statements that I made to him was my fear with AI and, Bard and ChatGPT or whatever it is, these types of platforms out there, is that I wonder if we're going to lose the ability as human beings to think, like, what is your thoughts, as it relates to technology? Obviously you're not anti-technology or anything like that. So, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. Time will tell, of course, but I always kind of look at this back at, because I do have some fears, but I remember sitting in like some of my engineering classes, and I was never the best student, honestly. Like I, thought I was smart until I got to the University of Illinois, and then I realized I'm pretty dumb. And then every semester I got like dumber. And like I landed that plane on fire with no landing gear, but I got out,
Okay.
But there was always like some professor who'd say something in class, and it's like, well, if we increase the pressure and the velocity, you all know what would happen. And like, there'd be a few smart kids in the front of class who'd be like, oh, I know what would happen. And I'd be like, I have no idea what would happen. Like, I actually have to put the numbers into the equation and calculate it. And then I'll know, because I had a limited understanding of how things actually worked.
Yeah.
Now, did that keep me from being effective in my career? No. But I certainly didn't understand things at that deeper level that those guys did. And I always kind of, for as much as I probably made fun of them when I was drinking my beers at the bar, I kind of envied their understanding of things that just were too tough for me to comprehend. I think that's going to happen more and more. And I don't think AI is going to necessarily replace people, but I think people who use AI are going to be able to replace people who don't leverage AI. And so I think it's an enormous competitive advantage. I do have that same fear as yours that says like, we're going to have just more people that don't understand the equation, or we get into a point where there's more single points of failure, where because we're all relying on this one person's understanding, if for some reason the person who set up this kind of understanding had a flaw in their logic, it gets propagated that much faster. Which is why, like, if you talk to any carpenter, like, you don't measure from the last measurement, you measure from a point of truth. Otherwise, you're propagating an error a bunch of times and you get tolerance stack up. So you can get into problems. And I fear like we're going to run into a bunch of those types of problems because we're going to be lazy and we're not going to do things right. The only reason carpenters are so effective at doing that and machinists are so effective is because they learn through the years, don't do that. Well, we're at the very infinitesimal level of AI, we're going to make all these mistakes, and it's probably going to take 50 years for us to learn, hey, don't do that anymore. Yeah. So get ready for some fun and some craziness, and hopefully it doesn't become, destructive craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Hey, so I know you've got a saying, Jim, that you like to leave folks 1 inch taller. What's that all about?
Yeah, I think it's just a nice way to think about yourself as the effect you have on other people with every interaction. And I know, people listening might not all be leaders, but everyone really to some degree is a leader in the world of the people you influence, the people around you. And I think the goal should always be with every interaction you have to say, Ron, after we talk today, I'd like for you to walk away feeling 1 inch taller, a little straighter, the way you're sitting up or standing, a little more confident in your stride, a little more positive about the day and the challenges in front of you. And if you enter every conversation with the mindset that says, I'd like to leave that other person feeling 1 inch taller, a lot of good things are going to happen in your life. A lot of good things are going to happen around you. If you go into these conversations feeling like, I want to make myself feel better by making you feel smaller, the world's not a fun place. There's a lot of crisis, a lot of conflict. And I just think that's a great credo to kind of live by.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I agree. All right. Well, hey, man, this has been a fun conversation, Jim. If folks, I guess the book's available anywhere books are sold, I assume. Is that was there a best place to go get it?
Yeah, Amazon's probably the best place, but you can find it online at, Walmart and Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. But
okay.
The best place to find anything about the book or me or whatever, anything I said interests you is probably businesswisdom.com. That website.
Wisdom.
So businesswisdom.com is a good website for me and for all the stuff that I do. And, maybe I struck a chord with someone listening, and that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I look forward. I haven't read the book yet personally. And I plan on ordering it and getting it because it sounds really interesting. So yeah, hey man, thanks for coming on. This has been a lot of fun, and maybe we'll do it again down the road sometime.
I appreciate that, Ron. Thank you very much, and keep up the great work.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening. Whether you've been on the continuous improvement journey for many years, or perhaps you're just getting started, Gemba Academy is here to support you. And while we're best known for our more than 1,500 Lean and Six Sigma teaching and virtual tour videos, we also have a team of experienced Lean and Six Sigma practitioners available for one-on-one coaching, as well as a variety of Lean and Six Sigma certification options. To learn more and to schedule a demo, head on over to gembaacademy.com.